Hello and welcome to my new podcast. I'm your host, Jen Curtis. If you're listening to this, you've probably been following me for some time on Instagram. And I wanted to create this podcast because as much as I love Instagram and have a good time with it, it's not very easy to go deep into some of these topics. You kind of have to keep it really short and concise. So podcasts are a great way to complement that short form content with longer form content where we can dive into some of the nuance and I can talk a little bit more freely about some of my opinions or approaches to fat loss and everything to do with exercise and dieting and training throughout pregnancy and the postpartum period. I think podcasts are a great way to do that. I listen to tons of podcasts myself because it's something that you can do as a busy mum, when you're washing the dishes, when you're tidying up, when you're folding laundry, while you're driving the car. So it doesn't actually take up, it's not like finding time for reading, for example. You can do it while you're doing other things that you have to do. So I've got a long list of topics that I want to cover on this podcast, everything to do with health and fitness, training, diet, fat loss, around pregnancy, postpartum. I obviously mainly work with mums of young kids. I have some older clients and some younger clients, but I have really zoomed in on that specific chapter of life over my career. So that's what I'm going to be talking about mostly. I'm sharing podcasts on specific topics around diet and training, but I'm also going to be going a bit wider with some, lifestyle stuff or motherhood or whatever else. So of course, feel free to send me requests. I'm always open to talking about any topics that you guys want to hear about. But I thought today a good place to start with is just fat loss, right? How fat loss works. And not only that, but what I'm going to talk about is like some of the myths. I'm going to talk about the mechanisms behind how fat loss works. And then I want to talk a little bit about my philosophy and approach to fat loss, especially in the context of, after having had a baby or having kids and being a mum and being busy and having a busy life. And I think this is a really important topic because a lot of people don't actually understand how fat loss works. And you might be feeling like, I don't care. I don't need to know all the science or whatever behind it. Just give me a meal plan. Just tell me what to do. But the thing is that when you understand how things work, you don't have to just follow arbitrary rules. You can understand the parameters within which you have to work to get the results that you want. So let's dive in. There's obviously a lot of noise out there. There are people, especially on Instagram, telling you, it's because of carbs, or you need to eat clean, or you need to cut out sugar or gluten, you need to do HIIT training or some other specific protocol, or not eat after 5 p.m. or intermittent fasting, or that you must eat breakfast to stoke the metabolic fire or whatever else. There's so much noise out there, and actually they all contradict each other, and they're all just based off of kind of arbitrary protocols that ultimately they can work, but they aren't getting to the crux of what really matters in order to lose weight. So let's talk about what you actually need to lose weight, like what we know, because we do actually know what it takes. It is actually pretty uncontested, in science. There's a big consensus on it. And at the end of the day, it's all about energy balance. It's all about calories in versus calories out. It really is that simple. If you consume more calories than you burn on a daily basis, your body can't just get rid of those excess calories that you consume, and it just stores it as body fat. If you eat the same number of calories, the same amount of energy every day from food that you burn, you stay the same weight. And if you consume less energy from food than you're burning each day, your body uses your excess fat stores to make up the difference of the energy that you're not consuming and burns your fat stores. And it really is that simple. It really does come down to energy balance and calories in versus calories out. I think it's important to touch on like exactly what a calorie is. It's super unfashionable to talk about calories, and people seem to think that there's something, you know, that's really dangerous or scary about calories. But calories is really just a unit of energy. It's just a unit of measurement. It measures energy. So it's like the amount of energy, heat energy that you need to heat up like 1 centimeter cubed of water by 1 degree Celsius or something like that. It's a very, very, very specific amount, just like a centimeter is a very specific amount, a pound is a very specific amount, a kilometer is a very specific amount. They obviously all measure different things, and a calorie is used to measure energy. So we're all burning energy all day, every day, right? Like it's not just something that you burn. You don't just burn energy when you move or when you do exercise. You're burning energy all the time, right? While you're sleeping, you're burning about 60 calories an hour. And there are 4 ways that the body, basically there are 4 ways that the body can, that the body uses energy. And that is broken down into BMR, which is your basic metabolic rate, which is basically if you just lied in bed all day and didn't eat or drink anything and didn't move, it's just how much energy it would you would need to just keep the lights on, to just stay alive, right? So the energy you would need for your brain to work, for your heart to pump, for, I don't know, just for like, for your hair to grow, for like cell regeneration to happen, just all of those basic things. These are metabolic processes that are going on all the time inside the body and are completely involuntary. And the average woman has a BMR of about 1,300 to 1,400 calories a day. That's how much you're burning every day without moving, without doing anything, right? Which is, you know, more than some people eat on diets. It's quite a large amount. And it mainly differs according to how big you are, right? So a bigger woman, say like 180 pounds, 5'10", she's gonna burn way more calories than somebody who is, you know, 5 foot and weighs like 110 pounds, because there's just more tissue, there's more of her. So that those basic metabolic processes we can't really control very much. It's just kind of set by how much of us there is. The second way that we burn calories is through NEAT, which is non-exercise activity thermogenesis, which basically means just all the non-exercise movement that we do. So just getting up and down to go to the toilet, typing on your keyboard, your fingers moving, sitting up straight, walking around, preparing food, all of that movement also burns energy. Then there's TEF, the thermic effect of food. So when you digest food, you're obviously breaking the food down to different components and in your digestive system, and it's going into your bloodstream and sent around your body. But the process of digestion actually costs energy as well. Then there's EAT, which is exercise activity thermogenesis, which is the exercise activity that you do. And this accounts for a very small amount of activity, depending on how much exercise you're doing, right? So it could be that you're doing an hour workout every single day and burning 500, 600 calories. Or it could be that you're working out twice a week and burning 400 calories in each of those workouts. It can vary massively from person to person. And obviously it can be zero. The thermic effect of food is also something that we can affect. So when you eat food that is harder for the body, when you eat more whole food, so foods that are closer to like how they exist in nature. So if you eat fruits and vegetables and meat and chicken and, you know, things and whole grains, they're much harder for the body to break down. So they cost us much more in terms of digestion than if you just eat highly processed, like, you know, cakes and biscuits and things like that. So we can actually affect how many calories we burn through eating more whole foods, right? So you burn more calories from eating protein than you do from eating cookies or whatever, or even white rice and white bread. You can obviously also impact how many calories you burn from NEAT. So if you move more during the day, you're obviously going to burn more calories. BMR we can't really impact very much, especially not in the short term. People talk about things like how to boost your metabolism and things like that, but it's absolute rubbish. Like drinking a certain, I don't know, lemon juice first thing in the morning, or eating breakfast, or eating certain foods, or avoiding other foods. These things do not boost your metabolism, right? You can't make the body burn more calories from those basic metabolic processes, right? It's all just marketing to like sell you something. But what you can do to increase your basic metabolic rate, just that energy that you're burning just from existing and keeping the lights on, what you can do is you can build more muscle. That's really the only tissue, obviously connective tissue and bone density as well. But through strategic resistance training, you can increase the amount of muscle mass that you have, which is quite an expensive tissue. So you can impact the basic metabolic rate because it costs more energy. If you've got an extra 5 kilos of muscle, it costs more to keep that muscle tissue alive and to repair it than it does to not have that tissue. So that's really the only way that you can kind of boost your metabolism, and it's really not by that much. It might be by if you train really, really consistently and go from not doing any strength training to doing it really consistently, you might be able to increase it by like 100 calories a day, but it's really not going to go up by that much, and it's kind of overrated how many calories you burn extra a day, how much more energy you burn a day through resistance training. So basically these 4 different ways of burning energy all add up to something called your TDEE, your total daily energy expenditure. And for the average woman, that might be 2,000 calories a day, right? And that's how much energy she needs to just stay the same weight. So in order to lose fat, what you need to do is consume fewer calories through your diet. And ideally, you would try to impact these 4 different ways that you burn energy. So you would try to build muscle, you try to move more, you try to eat more whole food so that you burn more calories through digestion, and you try to increase the amount that you exercise. So you're trying to do 2 things at the same time. If I need 2,000 calories a day to maintain my weight, what I'm trying to do is bring my calorie intake down below that level. How much we'll talk about later, but anything below 2,000 calories a day is going to be a calorie deficit. So 1,900 calories a day is also going to be a calorie deficit. And at the same time, I want to try to increase my calorie expenditure through manipulating those 4 different variables I mentioned before. So I think this is a good time to talk about the really obvious and common straw man arguments that come up quite a lot. So you'll hear people say things like, well, 100 calories of chicken is clearly not the same as 100 calories of chocolate. The thing is that it is. In terms of, if you're just measuring that one part of food, that one element of food, like the amount of energy that food provides, then it's exactly the same. 100 calories of chicken is the same as 100 calories of cookies or chocolate. It's kind of like saying, well, what's heavier, a pound of feathers or a pound of stones? It's obviously the same. They both weigh a pound, but there are other properties about stones and feathers that make them different. So this is true of chicken and chocolate. There are other properties about chicken and chocolate that make them different from each other. So in terms of calories, you could take 100 calories of each and they are the same in that respect. But they are different in 2 other important ways. One, the nutrient profile of those 100 calories. So the chicken, for example, will have more protein and less fat and far less carbohydrates. It won't have any carbohydrates in it, or almost 0. And the chocolate will have a lot more fat and a lot more sugar and a lot more and a lot less protein. And it might also have much fewer other nutrients like micronutrients like vitamins and minerals. And the third kind of property of the food is how filling they are, right? So 100 calories of chicken might make you much more full than 100 calories of chocolate. It also provides much more nutrition. Another important thing is that when you eat 100 calories of chicken, it might cost you 30 calories to digest that chicken, whereas the 100 calories of chocolate, it will probably only cost you about 10 calories to digest that chocolate. So the nutrient profile of that food also affects digestion and affects how full you are going to be from those two different types of food. So they're different in very important ways, but when it comes to calories, the number of calories that they put into your body, you can take 100 calories of chicken, 100 calories of chocolate, and it's exactly the same. Obviously, it also affects how many calories you're burning through digestion, but that doesn't mean that it's still not a simple equation of calories in versus calories out. It just means that there are several factors affecting what causes calories out and as well as calories in. So that's just to touch a little bit on some of the straw man arguments that are out there about calories. There's obviously so much content out there on the internet telling you like calories don't count or calories don't matter or calories are just a myth. And it's really, really, really coming from people who just don't understand how calories work. And they're also misrepresenting the calories in, calories out thing by saying that people like me who say that calories matter, what they say is that they misrepresent our views or our stances on it by saying that what we're saying is that the only thing that matters is calories, which is obviously not true. There are other things that matter about the food, like the nutrient profile, how many nutrients it has, and how filling that food is. So calories absolutely do matter, and they absolutely do govern fat loss, but they are not the only thing that matters about the food. Remember, two different things can be true at the same time. And anyone who argues this kind of thing is basically arguing that you can't have two different truths at the same time. Okay, so now that we've kind of talked about some of the myths and the mechanisms of fat loss, I want to talk a little bit about my particular approach and philosophy towards helping people lose fat. Now, obviously, I have an online coaching program where I coach people very closely, one-on-one, to help them reach their fat loss goals. And I have a kind of multifactorial approach, okay? There isn't one particular thing that I do that helps people lose fat. We have to come at it from lots of different angles because while it is a simple equation of calories in versus calories out, and actually the science of fat loss is very, very easy, what's really, really complicated is people. And we're super complicated and we complicate the fuck out of everything. And we're very messy. We have lots of inconvenient emotions and habits. So when we talk about fat loss in an individual context, while fat loss is actually incredibly simple, the principles behind it, implementing certain changes in people's lives is actually incredibly hard. So when someone comes to me with the goal of fat loss, which is primarily what I do, we first of all have to address that calories in versus calories out equation. So the first thing that we do, I have a calories first approach for everyone, blanket rule. We start with calories. That is not where we end, but we start off by understanding what your maintenance calories are and then what a range of deficit would look like. So for example, if your maintenance calories are 2,000 calories, It's really important to understand that, because anything less than 2,000 calories is a deficit. And yes, we can have quite an arbitrary target, say like a 20% deficit, 1,600 calories can be the target. I prefer to give people a range and help them understand the range where they will lose fat. So the target, the ideal target might be 1,600 calories a day, but under certain conditions, they may sometimes be able to get into a bigger deficit than that. And sometimes they won't be able to get into a 20% deficit, and they might eat 1,800 or 1,900 calories a day. It's okay, you are still in a deficit. And this is really important to understand, because you are not a robot. It is impossible to hit the exact same number of calories every single day. So first things first is we address calories, what your maintenance calories are and what a deficit would look like. The next thing that we address is the next easiest thing to address in this calories in versus calories out equation, and that is movement. Getting you moving more, doing more steps every single day, right? Steps is a great proxy for just movement. So if somebody's doing 3,000 steps a day, we might just focus on bringing that up to 4,000 steps a day in the beginning, because that's going to get them moving just a little bit more and it's going to feel attainable. Whereas if I just give them an arbitrary goal of 10,000 steps a day, it's going to be really overwhelming and hard to hit. So we're working on just increasing movement incrementally. Then we can also affect calories in versus calories out in two other ways. So one, by improving food quality, so eating more whole foods, right? Then you're going to burn more calories through digestion. And finally, by doing strength training. And over a period of time, you will build muscle, and then you will increase your metabolic rate because you now have more muscle. So my first port of call is to address those four different aspects of calories in versus calories out, those four different ways that we burn energy, and also getting you to address your calorie intake by understanding what a deficit looks like and getting into that deficit. So those are the big rocks. Those are the big things that we absolutely have to address and we absolutely have to change to start getting you losing body fat, right? You have to be in that calorie deficit in order for your body to start mobilizing your fat stores. But there are other things that matter, and I'm just going to run through them one by one quickly. So one is flexible dieting. This is understanding that as long as 80% of your food comes from whole foods, the other 20% can just be fun foods, right? Can just be junk food, can just be things that are not particularly healthy. You will get enough nutrition. You'll get all the nutrients that you need if your diet is only 80% on point. And if you include that 20% of junk, ice cream, cookies, whatever, as long as it's no more than 20% of your daily intake, you'll be healthy, you'll be able to lose fat, and you won't be hungry, right? As soon as we start to eat, like a bigger proportion of our daily intake comes from junk, we start to get more hungry because these foods are not particularly filling, and will be much less healthy. And so it will impact fat loss, but it will also impact our overall health. This approach of flexible dieting also helps people to practice moderation rather than going through these extremes of all or nothing thinking, cutting everything out of their diet, going on a really, really, really strict diet, and then going all the way back, swinging all the way back the other way to eating just whatever they want. We want to find a healthy, happy medium where you can include the foods that you enjoy without just overeating, but without over-restricting yourself so that you go absolutely batshit crazy. We also want to address some basic habits. Habits is a massive topic, and I can and probably will do an entire podcast just on habits because it's a fascinating topic. But basically, we want to start to set up some really basic habits that are going to help set you up for success. So things like eating at regular meal times rather than at just random times throughout the day. Having go-to foods and go-to meals for those meal times so that you don't just sort of get decision fatigue and then just eat a box of cookies. We also focus on filling foods. So a lot of people do this. They focus a lot on healthy foods, but a lot of healthy foods are terrible for fat loss because they're really, really calorie dense. And so you'll be left feeling hungry if you eat too much of them. So I have a big focus on filling foods. And obviously a few things matter. It's not just about eating filling foods. It's also about eating healthy foods, but we need to balance this up. If you're not eating, prioritizing really filling foods, so things like different types of protein, like chicken and meat and fish, but also things like bread and rice and stuff like that is actually quite low calorie, but really fills you up and adds a lot of fullness to your meals. If you're not prioritizing those sorts of food and you're prioritizing too many really, really, really calorie dense foods like nut butters and oils and nuts and dried fruit, even if they're healthy, they're too calorie dense and they'll make you starving hungry on your calorie budget. Another factor that we address is emotional eating and stress management, because this isn't going to just go away just because you start tracking calories. This is, if you do eat emotionally or binge eat or stress eat, like this is a totally different kettle of fish, and it's not going to get better by just tracking calories, right? You need different tools for different jobs. Like a hammer is really, really good for hammering in nails, but it's really bad for wiping your bum. You need toilet paper for that. So you need totally different tools for different jobs. And while calorie counting is fantastic for some things, it doesn't necessarily help. Sometimes it does help indirectly with stress eating and emotional eating, but it doesn't directly help. So for that, I work with my clients on I have various worksheets and exercises and journaling exercises to do to help them understand their emotional eating and create new habits. So there's totally different work to do there. And also another thing that we need to look at is psychology. Not just, in the context of emotional eating, but in the context of sort of distorted thinking. A lot of people have very distorted thinking, what's called cognitive distortions, about the whole process of fat loss, their bodies, diet, exercise. And it's really, really, really important for us to address those cognitive distortions and come up with more rational ways of thinking about it, because they can get in the way so much with fat loss, and they're usually the thing that throws us completely off rather than the ins and outs of fat loss itself. I mentioned before that strength training is an important part of the calories in versus calories out equation, partly because it actually burns calories when you're doing your strength training sessions. If you do 2 strength training sessions a week for 45 minutes, you might be burning 400 calories each session. So it obviously has that calorie burn effect, but it also helps you build muscle, which among other things, it has so many positive effects on your body and your mind. Injury prevention, things like preventing osteoporosis, improving your blood glucose, like insulin sensitivity and things like that. It also helps you build muscle, which increases your metabolic rate over time. Okay, so strength training is a very central part of what I do with clients, getting them to do that, whether they're a beginner or an intermediate or advanced, getting them to do something that actually fits into their lifestyle and actually gets them building muscle, because the devil is in the detail with this stuff. And again, I'll do an entire podcast just on strength training, but it's really important to be doing a structured program that actually leads to muscle building rather than just kind of, winging it as you go. So those are the different elements of kind of my approach or my philosophy around fat loss. Obviously, it's multifactorial. It's not just calories, or it's not just follow this meal plan or just do this magic workout. It's lots of different, it's manipulating all of the different factors that affect calories in and calories out. And to kind of summarize it, we want to focus on the big rocks first. So the big rocks being reducing your calorie intake, getting you moving more every day, getting you address. Also I didn't mention lifestyle stuff like sleeping enough and stuff like that. We want to attack those big rocks first. And something I like to say to a lot of clients is big rocks and low-hanging fruit, because sometimes there's some low-hanging fruit, some really easy things for us to do that aren't necessarily big rocks, but they're easy wins. So that's where the individual approach comes in as well, making sure that it's, what's low-hanging fruit for one person might be really, really hard for another person to implement. So, for example, getting 2 or 3 workouts in a week might be really easy for someone because they love working out and they have the time and resources to do it. Whereas for someone else, that might be the hardest thing in the world to do. So, while the big rocks look the same for everyone, calorie intake and how much movement you're doing every day and things like that, low-hanging fruit varies massively from person to person, and you have to capitalize on those things. Otherwise, you make it really, really hard and an uphill battle for the individual. We also want to focus on small changes rather than massive overhauls. So instead of completely changing your diet overnight, giving you a fresh new meal plan where nothing is familiar, we focus on what your current diet already is, the foods you already like to eat, and make tweaks from there. Get portion sizes under control and add improvements like adding some vegetables to the meal rather than just replacing, your normal sandwich with a salad. And another small change we might implement is going up from 3,000 steps a day to 4,000 steps a day rather than just to an arbitrary 10,000 steps a day. It's much easier to make those small changes that then compound over time than it is to completely overhaul everything about how you exercise and eat. Then, as we go along, we have to monitor and adjust. If one particular intervention or protocol isn't working for the individual, we don't just say, or I don't just tell them, just try harder. You just have to do it. No excuses. Everyone's got the same 24 hours every day. That kind of, those kind of sound bites. Instead, we have to figure out what's not working and change it so that it does work for them. So that might mean creating a simpler workout plan or creating some easier go-to meals so that they don't have to spend so much time planning and preparing. It might mean taking a couple of steps backwards and breaking it down into smaller chunks. It doesn't always look like just endless progression. And we also have a big focus on habit formation, on recognizing what the bad habits are that we've built up and replacing them with better habits and making them automated, greasing the groove, practicing them even when it's hard so that we create new habits that serve us and help us reach our goals long term. So hopefully now you understand the actual mechanisms behind fat loss and the different factors that contribute towards getting you in a calorie deficit or getting you in a surplus, and the different factors that you have to address in order to lose fat and in order to reach your goals. I also sort of went over my philosophy and my approach to it. So I hope you found that helpful. And ultimately, coaching isn't just about, the art of coaching isn't just about applying these rules, like really rigid rules, and just, saying no excuses, you've got to do this no matter what. It's about finding what actually works for the individual in the context of their everyday life. So I hope you enjoyed that first podcast and got some clarity from it. Please feel free to send me any questions, any requests for future podcasts. I'm going to cover lots of different topics around fat loss and training and postpartum and pregnancy. So please send me your requests, and I'm going to try to shoot one of these podcasts every week and send them out to you guys. Thanks for listening.